This is Tax Pro Nation, the home of independent tax professionals. Find community, maximize your earnings, and live life on your own terms. I'm your host, Jeff Dolan, Vice President of Pronto Tax School.
And I'm your co-host, Andy Fry, founder and CEO of Pronto Tax School. As a tax professional, you take pride in giving the best service you can to every client you serve. Too often, your good work goes unnoticed. Too often, your story goes untold. No more. Unnoticed and Untold ends now. Welcome to Season 2, the Season of Story, where it's all about recognizing and appreciating you, the hardworking tax professionals that inhabit the mysterious land known as Tax Pro Nation.
Welcome to the second episode of Season 2. In this episode, we're going to be hearing from Kevin Huston. He is the winner of the Most Inspirational Award from our 2020 My Tax Career Story contest. He was inspired by his grandmother to advocate for the poor, and this tax pro rose out of the projects to become a successful entrepreneur, and we cannot wait for you to hear our conversation with Kevin. Let's jump in. Hey, Kevin. Jeff and Andy at Pronto Tax School. How are you?
Hey, Jeff and Andy. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we are doing is we are interviewing the top tax pros in the Pronto Tax School family and hearing their stories, because one of the biggest things that we've realized is that if you're in the tax business and you're vulnerable and sharing who you really are and being authentic, it's a great way to connect with the right customers and partners and people that you're trying to serve and help, right?
Yes, it builds authenticity. Yes, that we're real people.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the tendency a lot of times is for tax pros to have a lot of knowledge and study and learn and then go into their office and never talk to anybody.
Very true.
So we're hoping to kind of counter that and get on this podcast and talk to real people and hear real stories. And so we're really excited to be on with you today. So with that, I just wanted to kick us off and get you started talking about how you grew up, what your background is, and get us started on this journey.
When you're young, you don't know how hard things are. I knew we were poor because we lived in the projects, and I saw people that had houses and they had cars and they had things that we didn't have. And so I knew there was this other world. Also, I had my grandmother who had a house and a car, and in my opinion, she was rich because she had a house and a car and we didn't. So I guess that gives you the drive to say, well, what can I do to get out of this? And I think a lot of people have that drive to get out, but there are so many systems and things in place to keep people from getting out. And that was part of my story, is that my mother got penalized for trying to get out, and there was no incentive for her to try to get out. And if I didn't have my grandmother encouraging me, I don't know that I would have gotten out.
And so would you say in your story, Kevin, the system and those systems that maybe sometimes don't put the right incentives in place for someone to really personally grow and professionally grow, would you say that's kind of like the villain of your story in a way, and something that you've kind of battled against?
Oh yeah, that's exactly, I mean, as I wrote, that's like my core values is I fight against unfair systems and unjust taxation, because those systems keep people from achieving what they want to achieve. So my whole life has been about battling the government, basically, because systems that the government puts in place try to keep people from going beyond where they have been or where they were.
And when you were a kid specifically and kind of growing up in the projects and not having those financial advantages and kind of battling the system as a kid, how did that specifically manifest and, potentially prevent you from becoming the person you are today?
Well, because the expectation is that you're going to end up just like your parent is that's living in the projects. And you see this all the time, and you hear about this, people who become pregnant at age 14 or whatever, and it's just one generation after another, they can't get out of it because they don't see a way out. But I did see a way out, which was the education, and I did see a better life with my grandmother teaching me a little bit about business and actually having some spending money that I could do things with on my own. So I had the good opportunity, or the good luck, I guess, maybe not opportunity, but I could see beyond my neighborhood. I could see beyond the projects. I could see that there was something else, and my grandmother believed in me. And again, as I wrote in my essay, my grandmother invested in her grandchildren, and she believed that if I showed up at school dressed in dirty clothes and looking like I lived in the projects, all the teachers were going to treat me like I belonged in the projects. But if I dressed like I belonged in the boardroom, they were going to treat me like I belonged in the boardroom. And they did. So yes, exactly. Wow. She was quite a strong woman. She was my hero.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really a mentor for you, from an early age. And I guess for people that, when we're in any situation where we kind of, all the odds are stacked against us and it's kind of a David and Goliath thing, it seems like, we're blessed with those, one or two key people that really believed in us, invested in us. And it sounds like your grandma, was that for you. You also mentioned in your story, Kevin, that that your mom had started a business. And I know that working in the field of helping people solve tax problems, it's a lot of self-employed people and people that kind of got on the wrong side of the tax system with starting a business that you end up helping today. How did your mom starting a business kind of influence your path as a tax professional?
Well, when she decided to start this house cleaning business, she was going to go out and clean, well, I called them rich people because they had actual houses and we didn't. We just lived in the projects. But she would go to these people's houses and clean, and she was trying to get a little bit money ahead, and so that she could do better for us, maybe move us out of the projects or buy us something nicer or just improve our lives. But when she reported to Social Services Welfare Department that she had made $100, now this is a long time ago, so $100 was a lot of money back then, but she had made $100 cleaning people's houses. She rode the bus, she bought the supplies, and she rode the bus back. So all day in order to clean somebody's house, and she had made $100 that month. And they said, well, that's wonderful, Lenore, but because you're earning money, you don't need as many benefits. So we're going to dock your food stamps by $100. And she really, that's really an effective tax rate of 100%. You earn money and the government takes it all away.
Wow.
So there was absolutely no incentive. And, and that's what she said. She said, you mean I can stay at home on my butt and you'll give me $100 worth of food stamps, or I can go out and bust my butt and I'll get $100, but you'll take away my food stamps? What's the incentive? So that was where I saw that the systems were not designed to help people out. They were designed to keep people where they were. I hate to use the term to keep people down, but it really is to keep people down. But
it's the conversation the government is still having today.
Yes, exactly. And this is 50 years later. This is literally 50 years later, and they have not solved that. How do you give somebody a hand up instead of a hand out? And so when I'm doing tax returns for people who are self-employed, I completely understand that, is that they're fighting an uphill battle. And if they don't know to keep good records, they don't know what's deductible, they end up owing the government more money than they legally should, and they don't have enough to provide for their families. Or they provide for their families and then get really, really behind on what they owe the government. And neither of those is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of a catch-22. And I just comes to mind with this whole, coronavirus economic crisis that we're in now, a similar dynamic, Kevin, where you have people that have been laid off from their W-2 job, right? So they're collecting unemployment. And in some cases, they are concerned that if they start a self-employment activity, maybe they want to start that business that they've always thought about. Now they've got a little bit of time. They feel like their unemployment benefits are going to be automatically decreased by whatever they make. In other words, incentivizing them to not start a business that could provide a living for them. But as tax pros, we know that depending on your state unemployment system, they may let you work off net income, so you can, use your deductions to kind of optimize that and get into that. So it sounds like you saw those, whether we want to call them loopholes, right? We use that word affectionately, but
Yeah.
not everybody does. But those little, kind of tips and tricks, it sounds like you saw that early on at the potential to kind of get on the right side of that, even as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big lesson. And I realized that you have to figure out a way, because there has to be a way. Life isn't designed to be miserable. Life is designed to be enjoyed. And so there has to be a way to get out of being miserable.
And what would you say, Kevin, to somebody that obviously you had your grandma that really was an inspiration to you and helped you along the way? What would you say to a kid today that maybe is struggling with some of the same things that you are, but doesn't necessarily have that family member or that trusted person? Like, what's the number one thing they need to do to kind of get out of their situation and advance themselves, do you think?
And this was part of my story also, but education was so important to get out. But there are so many disincentives for education. When I went to college, I got a full scholarship because I had really good grades in school. And I found out just a few years ago that they took away my mother's food stamps for my little sister and my mom and their welfare because I had gotten a scholarship. And the social services believed that I should be using that money to help support them instead of going off to college. And so
wow.
But my mother didn't even tell me about this until 5 years ago, because she knew if she told me when I was 19 years old, I would have quit school. I wouldn't have gone on.
Right.
Because why would you want to harm your little sister and harm your parents? So she hid that for me for years.
Wow.
Now, did you start in a kind of a traditional tax prep business? How did you actually get into the tax business specifically?
Well, after I got my master's degree in business administration, I got this job for a local accounting firm in Atlanta, and we would go around and pick up the bookkeeping from local businesses. We would do their monthly bookkeeping and then go back and try to share some tips on how they could do better.
Cool.
That's where I met an enrolled agent who worked for that firm, who taught me a tax class so that I could start doing their 1040s and eventually do their corporate returns, etc. And I really liked it, and I wanted to do that on my own. So about a year later, I went out on my own and rented a building from this lady who had a real estate business, but she was going out of business. So I bought her phone number because it ended in 000, and I wanted a catchy phone number.
Nice.
I put a sign out, and I got a lot of local people because this was an area where people were moving to, and then I got a lot of referrals. The main reason I became an enrolled agent is, one, because I had learned from that enrolled agent at that prior firm, but two, because as a tax preparer, there was only so much I could do to help people. I could help people up to the filing.
Right.
If they were in an audit or if they owed and needed collection work, I wasn't able to really help them. So I felt this calling to help my clients. They had trusted me, they'd come to me, and they needed my help. So that meant that I needed to get that education and get that credential. Again, I'm a big believer in education, so it just seemed natural. Well, that's the progression of where you want to go.
And how did becoming an EA, like with, because you obviously saw a need among your clients, your tax prep clients, for those additional representation and kind of battling the system kind of dynamic, right? How for anybody maybe that's considering becoming an EA, right? It's kind of a little understood credential, you could say, as far as like what it means to us as tax professionals. How specifically did that change what you were able to do for your clients?
Well, it allowed me to do more than tax preparation. It allowed me to fight for my clients against these unfair systems and unfair government. It allowed me to represent those clients and allow them what they're supposed to be allowed. It was really, for me, part of my core belief. Again, going back to fighting against the systems after learning that they were unfair from my mother's cleaning business is that this just seemed like a natural progression is, well, there's still systems that I need to fight against, and I need to help people. So to me, becoming an enrolled agent was a natural progression. If you want to really help your clients with tax problems, then I would recommend you either become an attorney, a CPA, or an enrolled agent. And for me, the enrolled agent was the answer.
Yeah, and I was very interested to see, Kevin, too. One of the interesting parts of your story was that, I'm an EA as well. And so EAs, we normally can bring a tax problem resolution situation or effort up to tax court, but then needing to pass that off to an attorney or to teamwork with an attorney for that tax court piece. In true style of your ability to navigate complex systems, you actually were able to obtain an educational pathway that lets you represent people in tax court. How did that happen, and how is that an important part of what you do?
I needed to help some clients beyond what I could do with the IRS. I saw people around me, these various conferences and the various educational sessions that we all attend. I saw people around me who had this other credential, the United States Tax Court Practitioner. And I asked them about that. And they said, well, you don't have to go to law school, but you have to pass this bar exam given by the tax court. It's only given every other year. It's very difficult. Typically only 5 to 8, maybe 12% at the most pass. And there's only been about 350 people since the beginning of the history of the United States who have actually done this.
So you said perfect.
Yeah,
bring it on.
That sounds like me. Exactly. That sounds like me. Now, I actually took the exam close to 20 years ago, and I had taken this class to prepare myself to take this bar exam. And in the class, he said, well, there's 4 parts to this. The instructor said there's 4 parts to this, and the one part is so easy. All you have to do is buy this book and read it. Well, I forgot to buy the book.
Uh-oh.
And therefore I got everything out, all the hard part done, but the part that's supposed to take 20 minutes, and if you read the book, you can answer the questions. I forgot to read that book. Oh. And so I failed that part. Oh. You have to sound like an attorney in the answers. You can't sound like an accountant.
Okay.
And so they were looking, they're looking for attorney answers. If you're going to be admitted to the bar, the same as these people who paid $40,000 a year for tuition at law school, then you better sound like us. Otherwise, you're not included in this club.
That's part of the system.
That made me, yes, but that made me so mad that for about 12 years, that was the only exam in my life I didn't pass on the first try.
Wow.
So I passed the EA exam on the first try, and that was back when you had to take 4 parts all at once. But anyway, I didn't pass this because I didn't study, and I was so mad for 12 years, then I decided I need to go back, and I'm not going to let that beat me. I'm going to beat it. So I took another class and passed the exam.
12 years later.
Grit.
Wow. Yes, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a testament to that persistence piece and getting beyond those initial hurdles. And then so with that tax court, what the credential is called what again, Kevin?
The credential called USTCP, which stands for United States Tax Court Practitioner. Basically, I'm a tax attorney in front of tax court.
Wow, cool.
So they treat me the same as any other attorney, even though I didn't go to law school.
Cool, because I have a feeling there might be a couple people who listen to this podcast that might want to look into that. So I'm glad we kind of repeated what the credential name is.
Yes.
Because being an EA, it kind of feels like an attorney.
It's a wonderful designation.
You really enjoy that, having that credential?
Yes, I do, because I get referrals from other people who can't do what I can do. And obviously the IRS respects me more because once they look up what that means, they say, oh my gosh, you got to deal with him. And yes, so they treat me with a lot more respect when you have some credentials than if you don't have the credentials. I think they try to take advantage of people without credentials because they assume that they don't know their stuff. Whereas the more credentials you have, I think the more stuff they realize you know.
Knowledge game.
Knowledge.
Yeah. And being an EA is interesting because being an EA, you kind of, part of the rush of it with helping people with these issues is you kind of feel like an attorney to a certain degree in terms of that kind of Atticus Finch, like where you feel like you're really standing up for for people and helping them in that meaningful way. And so what was kind of the highlight of being able to put that U.S. tax court credential to work as you started to really deploy that for your clients?
Well, one of the first cases that I had to do some research, and the IRS was assessing tax or had assessed tax against a taxpayer, and I just felt that was wrong. I did some research, and I presented my findings in writing to the chief counsel office, and they basically conceded. They said, you know what, you're right. We're not going to take this to court. So I didn't even have to go to court that was the first case I won without having to go to court. They conceded 100%. They refunded any money that they had already taken from these people, and they wiped the slate clean. You don't owe it. So that's a tremendous feeling.
Proverbial slam dunk.
Yeah, but again, the taxpayer, the little guy, would not have known how to fight that. And would have, I think a lot of people are taken advantage of because they just don't know how to fight, or they don't hire somebody who can fight. And so they get taken advantage of. They're stuck in a system that they can't get out of. And so somebody has to be there. That's my challenge to the people listening. My challenge to you listening is to be that special person that can actually help these clients to fight against the IRS.
Yeah, love it. So I wanted to see if you could touch on, there's a lot of tax pros, right? We're still refining our story. A lot of the things that you've shared are things that not everybody feels comfortable sharing, right? And we kind of have to grow into that as business people and realize how our story can actually attract clients, can bond us to clients, can bond us to our communities, can open up new opportunities. And that's one of the main things we want to do by this story contest. And so I know that in order for you to be able to get your story to this point, right? It didn't just, like you said, fall out of the sky.
No.
There's things that you developed yourself in order to do that. And I believe you mentioned that you've got some great coaching.
Yeah.
I saw one of your Facebook coaches,
right.
One of your Facebook posts to that effect. Can you talk us through, like, let's say I'm a tax pro and I'm like, this guy's got an amazing story. And maybe I don't know what my story is yet, or I need to refine it better and I want to aspire up to what you've got going here in terms of using your story for your business. What would you recommend that type of tax pro do?
Well, I think the main thing is to think about, where did you learn the core lessons that drive you? What drives you to do what you do, and where did you learn that? And then you've got to work past the crying. And even 50 years later, there's parts of the story I don't tell because I would probably break down and cry. So you have to work past that and be vulnerable. But when you are, I think you let people know that you're real. People now, they see all these designations and all this, Kevin's a wonderful person, whatever. And if they don't know my background, they just think it all dropped on me out of the sky. No, it didn't. So once they learn my true story, then they have this empathy for me, and they're like, oh my gosh, now I understand why he does what he does. He does it because that's who he is. It goes back to when he was 7 and 8 years old, that everything he's done in his life brought him to the point where he is now, and he is where he is because of that. And so people who are developing their story need to look at that. What is it that drives you to do what you do? And where did you learn that? What were the life lessons that you learned that at?
And just observing your story, your viewpoint is different as well, because you had a longer term view of where you wanted to be, and you were willing to go through the difficulty to achieve that. Whereas I think a lot of people, they're looking so short term that they kind of try to shortcut everything, and they're not willing to go through any kind of pain to get something worthy of the work and the pain, right? So your view of having a long-term view, I think really aided you as well.
There are some people who life is easier for. I'm not one of them, and I think a lot of people are not in that group. I think a lot of people have to work for what they accomplish. So other people are handed things, and I don't think things mean as much to them because it came too easy. But when you have to struggle and you have to work for something, I think it means more to you. And I think you're more passionate about it then, because you realize this is who I am. And when I tell that to clients, they're like, oh, you really do believe that you are here to help me? Yes, I am. I'm here to help you. And I tell that to clients a lot. I said, God put you in front of my desk to hear what I'm about to tell you. And people are like, oh my gosh, yes.
Powerful.
But I honestly believe that. I honestly believe that my preparation was so that I can teach them something or help them, and their preparation was that God put them in front of me at that time to hear what I have to say. Now, I'm not saying that I know everything. I'm certainly not saying that. But I am saying that the reason they're in front of me is because I can help them, and I have a passion for helping people.
It's awesome. Such a great message, such a great story. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I'm so excited to be able to share this call with all of our listeners. And I know they're going to get amazing benefits from it, and hopefully we're changing lives just by publishing this and getting this out in the world. And we're so appreciative of what you do in helping all of your clients and the greater community. So thank you for coming on and just sharing your story.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you.
All right.
Have a great day, okay?
You too. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.